Well, it's a pleasure for me to be here among distinguished guests and people of the industry, but also a great part of participation of the military. We live in interesting times. Geopolitical tensions are rising with war erupting back in Europe, alarming situation persisting in Middle East, and the East and West moving rapidly in conflicting directions. Globalization has proven to be beneficial as it has elevated the living standards of billions of people. However, it has also prompted countries to seek greater leverage in global affairs than ever before. In these critical times, the role of armed forces and defense capabilities have increased. New parameters have taken precedence over the old. Now, arsenals are not only evaluated by the quality of their inventory, but also by the replacement rate and the existing defense capability and their associated costs. New war tactics, including the usage of drone, both airborne and seaborne, are part of the new strategic landscape. Eastern Europe, the Black Sea, Eastern Mediterranean, and Red Sea pose new threats to our security. In this new world, Europe has finally realized that economic prosperity cannot be pursued and secured without security. Therefore, with the adoption of new policies, some of them already presented to you by the eloquent speakers, the EU encourages innovation in the defense industry and the cooperation among member states. Furthermore, with the adoption for the first time of the Maritime Industrial Strategy by the European Parliament last month, opens the discussion needed for the future of shipbuilding in Europe. Still, these developments, although positive, do not address the production gap between East and West. Only 2.7% of ships built globally are EU-made. Consider that 24 years ago, in the early 2000s, Europe was producing 57% of the world's new buildings. It is evident from these figures that back in the early 2000s, Europe had already lost a significant share of the market, particularly in large tankers and bulk carriers. But in other sectors, such as container ships, ferries, ro-ro ships, general cargo ships, chemical tankers, and of course, and above all, cruise ships, it still had a fair or even dominant share of the world merchant shipbuilding market. All this is happening while Europe is relying for more than 75% for its energy and good trade to be done seaborne. And investments at the same time in rail, airplanes, and roads are booming, but the same does not apply to shipyards and ports. By 2030, more than 336 million gross tonnage will be built globally, as estimated by OECD. In this market, European shipyards, if the current trends continues, will not get a fair share. Nowadays, while the Chinese order only 1% of their total order book outside China, for South Korea, this figure is 9%, and for Japan is 30%. For Europe, only 5% of their European orders are directed in the internal market. Still, more than 150 great shipyards are operating in Europe, giving work and employment to more than 120,000 people of highly sophisticated and highly paid workers. The need for investment and facilitation of EU shipbuilding capabilities is even more apparent when it comes to defense. Over the next 20 years, more than 160 billions are going to be invested in defense projects. UK will lead this race with more than 60 billion, while our neighbor Turkey plans to spend almost $1 billion a year for 20 years for upgrading of its naval defense capabilities. Coming to our country, the situation has changed since the recent past. I remember when I was Minister of Shipping back in 2013-14, that it was impossible for a Greek shipyard to participate in any tender of the Hellenic Coast Guard because of lack of financing, inability for international cooperation, and even obtaining the necessary letter of guarantee for participating in the tender was impossible. Now the outlook for the Greek shipbuilding has completely changed. The ship repair market is a booming one, and the major shipyards are back with new owners. Coming from Skaramangas Shipyard, I decided to follow and pursue the vision of Mr. George Prokopiou for a revival of the biggest shipyard of Greece. Skaramangas was originally built in the 30s in order to serve the needs of the Hellenic Navy for new ships. It was destroyed during the Second World War and rebuilt in the mid-50s by Stavros Niarchos, becoming a very productive facility. In 1979, Skaramangas built the first ever naval ship built in Greece. Some of the Navy people remember the Combattante 3, the missile boats. And in the following years, it has produced several other ships, including the gunboats Machitis, with a totally Greek design. It has also built the Meko 200 in the early 2000s, and the most significant work the shipyard undertook and delivered were the submarines 214, the Papalikonis class, which now represent the most sophisticated weapon of the Hellenic Navy. In recent years, none of the Greek shipyards were able to participate in the procurement of new ships for either the Hellenic Navy or the Hellenic Coast Guard. The FDIs are being fully built in France, and the new boats of the Coast Guard are made in Holland, Italy, Croatia, and elsewhere. This trend, if continued, will jeopardize Greece's ability to produce ships for its own defense. The agenda for 2030, presented by Mr. Dendias, the Minister of Defense, with his personal assurance that we all heard this morning, that Greece will cease to buy from the shelf and that it will promote the highest possible Greek added value in the future program, are definitely steps in the right direction. Today, we face a new landscape in naval capabilities of NATO and the Western Alliance altogether. For the first time in history, China's Navy surpasses the number of US ships, and the replacement capability of the United States are at 1/5 of those of China. The same applies to EU member states. Old ships patrol in Eastern Mediterranean and the Red Sea. For Greece, the need for a modern navy is even more apparent. Today, as we speak, 3 Greek ships patrol in Lebanon, Libya, and the Red Sea. Meanwhile, the needs for national defense and deterrence are greater than ever before. The plan to deploy oil and gas platforms into the territorial waters and the exclusive economic zone of our country. The doubling of the territorial waters in the western part of Greece, the asymmetric threats, the agreements for extended search and rescue areas like the one we signed with Egypt, the illegal and irregular migration mainly from sea, and multiple dangers arising from the climate change make it imperative to act now. Skaramangas privatization process was finalized a year ago. Since last January, our team took over from the Hellenic Navy that operated the shipyard until then. And since February, we have been able to accommodate more than 12 commercial ships for repairs, the first after 15 years that the shipyard was excluded from the private business. In the meantime, we are performing an extended program of maintenance and refurbishing of the existing infrastructure. Many capabilities will be added to the shipyard for servicing LNG carriers, mega yachts, but also we also plan to increase our dry docking capability. All this is privately financed without taking a single euro from the state or the Hellenic Navy. So far, we haven't been awarded any new projects from the Hellenic Navy. Dear all, George Prokopiou's vision is for Greece to have a state-of-the-art shipyard for both commercial and naval activities. He wants to keep alive the sophistication accumulated by the experienced personnel of Skaramangas Shipyard and enrich it with new trends in shipbuilding technology. He has, and his team, successfully completed more than 200 new building vessels of various types. Now, we want to import this knowledge in our country. Our vision is for Greece to design and build our own Navy ships. For that end, systematic cooperation between the shipyards and the Navy is needed. By performing heavy repairs, mid-life upgrades, a new building project in cooperation with other shipyards, we will get the necessary experience, tools, and infrastructure. If this strategy is adopted and followed, it will be realistic to say that in some years from now, Greece will be able to build its own ocean-going military vessels like frigates and corvettes. And I think that every single of you joins our vision. Thank you very much.